The sound of footsteps approaching the guest room made them both hold their breaths. Jungkook gestured Vine to be quiet as he quickly moved to the door, his gun raised, ready to protect Vine, whose heart was thundering in her chest. One of his men appeared, his face grim but showing relief when he saw Jungkook. "We've taken care of the intruders," the man reported. "The house is secure." Jungkook nodded, lowering his gun. "Good. Keep a close watch. We can't afford any more surprises." The man nodded and left, closing the door behind him. Jungkook turned back to Vine, who was still sitting on the bed, her eyes red and swollen from crying. He walked over and sat beside her again, a heavy silence settling between them. "You should rest," Jungkook said gently. "You've been through a lot." Vine shook her head, although exhaustion was evident in her eyes. She said, "I don't want to sleep. Please stay for a few more minutes." Her hands trembled for the fact that he will leave this room if she decided to sleep, and she will be alone again with her fears and racing mind. Jungkook hesitated before speaking. "You can sleep. I will stay here until you do." Vine looked at him, surprised by the offer. "No, I told you I don't want to." Jungkook held her shoulders and looked into her eyes. "Trust me, I won't do anything while you sleep." The look in his eyes at that moment made her trust him for some reason. She swallowed and nodded as he switched off the lights and sat on the couch beside the bed. The distance between them was a few feet, but his presence was a comforting barrier between her and the world outside. Jungkook watched over her, his mind racing with thoughts and emotions for Vine. He looked at her face as she slept, and he realized that he liked her better when she wasn't scared. She is so beautiful when she is not crying. He wanted to see her like that for the rest of his life. As Jungkook was watching her, the adrenaline rushed inside his veins, and he got close to her, on the bed beside her. He ran his finger across her cheek and he leaned down to kiss her. His heartbeat fastened as he moved closer to her. But then he remembered himself saying to her, "Trust me, I won't do anything while you sleep." The thought made him immediately move back and take a few heavy breaths. He couldn't control himself while he was this close to her, but he didn't want to break her trust as well. He would get her by her own will. He was confused because he knew he wasn't so soft-hearted before he met Vine. He can get anything if he wants, but not her, until she wants to be with him. He controlled his emotions and stormed outside the room immediately, before he could get other thoughts. Next morning, Vine woke up feeling a bit better than she had usually feel in her father's house. Everything was usual. Jungkook went to his work and Vine killed time. At night, when he returned home, she opened the door again and everything was the same again. Him drinking and his hands and shirt filled with blood. Her heart melted for him as she saw the wounds, but no one was calling again a doctor for him. Without realizing, she rushed towards him and said, "You're bleeding so much, gosh." Jungkook's eyes went to her and he was confused as he looked at her worried face, all because of him. Jungkook's expression softened as he saw the genuine concern in Vine's eyes. Despite everything, she cared for him. Vine quickly fetched the first aid kit that was kept in her guest room and began tending to his injuries. Her hands were gentle but firm, and her touch, despite the pain it brought, was strangely comforting to Jungkook. He winced as she cleaned a particularly deep cut, but didn't say a word, just watched her with an intensity that made her feel both nervous and comforted. As she bandaged his wounds, Jungkook finally spoke. "Why do you care so much?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Vine paused, looking up at him. "Because you're not a monster," she said simply. "And because I know what it's like to be hurt and alone. No one should have to suffer like that." Jungkook's gaze softened even further. He wasn't used to kindness, especially not from someone who had every reason to hate him. Vine, as she was done. "Why doesn't anyone call a doctor for you?" Jungkook sighed, looking away for a moment before meeting her eyes. "I told them not to. It's my daily routine, Vine. I'm used to this. Doctors won't change anything." Vine paused, looking at him with a mixture of frustration and concern. "But you can't keep living like this," she said softly. Jungkook shrugged slightly. "It's the life I've chosen. Or rather, the life that chose me. I don't expect you to understand." Vine finished bandaging his wounds, her touch lingering a moment longer. She looked up at him, determination in her eyes. "You're not coming home like this from now on." Jungkook raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her sudden firmness. "And why is that?" "Because I'll be waiting for you," she said simply. "And I don't want to see you drenched in blood every day. I can't see you like this." For a moment, Jungkook was taken aback. No one had ever said something like that to him. He felt a strange warmth in his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. Why? He wanted to ask her about the reason, about her treating his wounds, about her caring for him, but he couldn't get words out of his mouth. He looked in her eyes, and she looked back. At that time, he didn't bother to ask anything. He knew everything without the need of her telling about it. His heart felt at peace and he smiled as he gently held her hand and pulled her closer to him. Their lips met in a soft, tentative kiss. Jungkook's hand cupped moved to cup her cheek, his thumb stroking her skin slightly. Vine's eyes widened. Yes, she was worried for him, but she didn't expect him to do this in return. She was taken aback as he deepened the kiss, her hand falling on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her touch. Vine's presence brought a sense of calm and acceptance for Jungkook that he hadn't known was possible. Each touch, each breath, spoke volumes of the unspoken feelings between them. The weight of their past seemed to fade away in the background, replaced by the warmth of their connection. When they finally parted, Vine looked at him all shocked and Jungkook looked back into her eyes, seeing a reflection of his own longing and hope. "Thank you for treating my wounds," he murmured, and they both knew that he wasn't talking about the wounds in his hands, but the ones that were buried deep within. Vine smiled softly, her fingers tracing the lines of his face. "We will figure this out together," she replied, her voice filled with determination. They sat together in the quiet, the night outside fading into stillness. In each other's presence, they found a home from the storm that had surrounded them. Vine hugged him, resting her head on his chest, and he hugged her back, providing a warmth yet protective embrace.